So it's going to go more like. So I'm going to put that on the metronome. And this is also a great example of a slow 6/8 blues. When you're usually playing the triplet in the right hand, it's going to either be 6/8 or 12/8. It's an easier way to notate it. However, 12/8 is going to still occupy the same amount of space as 4/4. It's just going to have the triplets. So instead of having 4 quarter notes, you're going to have 4 quarter notes now with 3 subdivisions. That's where you get the 12 from. So let's play this beat. I'm going to start with just quarter notes in the bass drum, and then I'm going to evolve that to playing 2 beats in the bass drum every beat. 2, 3. Again, once you start getting that, I ended my example with a fill. So you should too when you start playing these grooves. After 4 or 8 bars, try to put a fill in at the end. And it doesn't have to be anything complicated. It can just simply be triplet, triplet, 1 triplet, 2 triplet, 3 triplet, 4 triplet, 1. You don't have to play anything fast to have a good fill. Sometimes the best fill is the simple fill because you need to always relate what you're playing on the drums to the song that you're playing. So next time you listen to a song, try to ask yourself questions like, is there 8th notes in the hi-hat? Are there 16th notes? Are they triplets? What's the bass drum and the snare drum doing? Try to start being able to hear these elements of songs that are on the radio, in your car, down the street, you know, in the coffee shop. Try to listen to what's happening, and then you'll start to just learn new ideas or grab new ideas from listening to the songs that are around you. I want to address the 16th note hi-hat feel that I was talking about earlier. For some of you, it might be a little difficult in the beginning to have the hand speed to play the 16th notes with one hand like this. If this is too fast for you with one hand, to play these 16th note grooves, you can use your left hand and alternate on the hi-hat, and then your right hand will come and play the backbeat. 1, 2, 3, 4. So now I have my metronome up at 90. Let's see what happens when I put the alternating 16th notes on the hi-hat. 3, 4. Now that you've experimented with moving your bass drum around, and maybe moving your snare drum around on different eighth notes, you might wonder, well, what else can I do with just eighth notes and quarter notes? Well, if you're just playing hi-hat, snare drum, and bass drum, and you've started experimenting with your bass drum and your snare drum, the only option now that you have to experiment with is putting some air in your hi-hats and opening them up every once in a while. So a good exercise, like how I moved the bass drum around, is to try just taking 1/8 note and opening the hi-hat. I'm going to start on the and of 4 because that's probably the most common one. But then I'm going to start moving it through the entire bar from 1, the and of 1, 2, the and of 2, etc. And I'm going to demonstrate all these playing each one twice. 1, 2, and 3, and 4, and 1, and 2, and 3, and 4, and 1, and 2, and 3, and 4, and 1, and 2, and 3, and 4, and 1, 2, and 3, and 4, and 1, and 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 2, and 3, and 4, and 1. Doing an exercise like this, where you're moving one bar, one variation through all the bar, will hopefully allow you to start being able to do that again at your own will and creatively. So when you're playing a song, you can just open the hi-hat when all of a sudden you feel like opening the hi-hat, and you don't necessarily have to do it just on one beat. You can open it on the and of 1, then the and of 4, then on 3. You can use it as another tool to slightly vary the groove, and in live performance, this is very important to keeping the audience engaged as well as allowing you to have some fun with what you're doing. And that's the ultimate goal, right, is to have fun when you're playing. So now that we've started talking about quarter notes, eighth notes, 16th notes, and triplets, I want to talk about putting the bass drum on some of the 16th notes. It's a great way to add some spice and kick to the groove that you're playing. So listen to what happens when, instead of playing 1 and 3 and on the bass drum, I'm going to move it to 1 and then the or the last 16th note. So instead of going 1 and, it'll go 1-y and And it's going to lead me right into my snare drum on beat 2 and 4. And it's going to add a little bit more energy to the groove, in my opinion. So I'm going to start playing 1 and 3 and with eighth notes, and then I'm going to slide that second eighth note over a 16th note, and let's see what that feels like. This is also going to be the first time that you're trying to put your right foot in between where your right hand is. And I'll also show you ways to practice just that motion in itself. So here we go. 2, 3. 3 and 3 and a 1-y and a 2-y and a 3-y and a 4-y and a 1-y and a 2-y and a 3-y and a 4-y and a 2-y and a 3-y and a 4-y and a 1 and 2-y and a 3-y and a 4-y and a 1 and 2-y and a 3-y and a 4-y and a 1-y and a 2-y and a 3 and 4 and 1-y and a 2-y and a 3 and 4 and 1. If you start understanding how to place the right foot on some of the inner 16th notes, one of the things you can do now will be playing 2 16th notes in a row on the bass drum. Generally, they're played as a pickup to the downbeat or to beat 3. So it would be 1-y and a 2-y and a 3-y and a 4-y and a 1. And if you can do that, you're going to start to get grooves like this. 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, a 4 and a 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and a 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and a 1. To understand how to put those doubles in and around your hi-hat, you need to break it down really, really slow first. It's a motion that your body's not going to be comfortable with in the beginning. So you have to do it without a metronome, just by itself, those 3 beats. It's going to go like this. So you notice that I hit the hi-hat, then immediately I'm going to the bass drum, but then they're going to hit together at the end. So if you can start to get this really, really slow, you can slowly start to speed it up. So you should not necessarily try speeding it up on yourself, but rather just play at different tempos really slow at first, then try to do it consistently at another tempo. You want to always be stressing good time, and if you practice exercises starting slow and then speeding up, you're going to get in the habit of rushing. So let's see what happens if I start very slow and then slowly start playing it at different tempos. So as an exercise, I won't even put my left hand into the equation, because right now I'm just trying to figure out how to go about it between the right side of my body. And if you get really adventurous, you can put the bass drum doubles on all the different 16th notes. So you won't all have, but you might have, if it was on the downbeat, which is the reverse. You hit together, then there's the extra bass drum, and then there's the hi-hat. So again, you can practice this motion really slow as well. So then you can try putting them both in and make an exercise out of that yourself. You can, if you're creative enough, you can start throwing it anywhere. But here's a simple groove employing both the variations of those. I'm going to play just the pickup a 1 and a 3. Then I'm also going to play 1E, 3E. And then I'm going to play a groove that involves both of those in one bar. So here we go. 2 and 3 and 4 and a 1 and 2 and a 3 and a 4 and a 1 and a 2 and a 3 and a 4 and a 1 and a 2 and a 3 and a 4 and 1 and a 2 and a 3 and a 4 and a 1 and a 2 and a 3 and a 4 and a 1 and a 2 and a 3 and a 4 and 1 and a 2 and a 3 and a 4 and a 1 and a 2 and a 3 and a 4 and a 1. So you see I put the double starting on the downbeat and then as a pickup to beat 3, and then I reversed it to being the pickup to the downbeat and then the double on beat 3. These are all ways to just slightly vary it. And if you get, like with the 8th notes, if you get an understanding of how to play these two subdivisions together, then you can start putting it through the entire bar. And now I'm going to explain or show you an exercise that you can do like that, where you do it on every beat and then move it over a 16th note until you've gone and you're back at where you started. 2, 3, 4. 3 and a 4 and a 1 and a 2 and a 3 and a 4 and a 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 1 and a 2 and a 3 and a 4 So I move it over that rhythmic set of 2 bass drum beats on the 16th notes. I just move them over 1/16th note after every 2 or 4 bars. And that's going to start to give you the independence and coordination to start putting those doubles wherever you want. And then you can start mixing that with 8th notes and quarter notes as well, and you start being able to play almost every groove that you'll ever hear on the radio. Hi, my name is Devin Collins, and I want to welcome you to my instructional DVD. In this video, we're going to look at live footage taken from a concert that I played in Taipei City, Taiwan in August of 2008. I was fortunate enough to be playing with the Sal DiFusco project, which had Sal DiFusco on guitar, Joe Santerre on bass, and Kaya Zhang on keyboards. This concert offered me a chance to play a wide variety of musical styles. And what I want to do in this video is break down some of these styles so that everybody can start playing them. We'll start with some simple funk and fusion grooves, like with the song The Chicken and Groove Cakes. And from there, we'll move to some of the Latin fusion feels, like with the song Behind the Veil and No Divisions. Lastly, I'll go over some more complicated material with Frenzy and Don't Open That, which are both odd meter songs that involve a little more rhythmically. What I'm going to do in this video is play the groove as I played it live, and then start breaking it down and slowing it down to show everybody how it works. And then I'll start showing some subtle variations that I added in the live performance, and maybe even show you some of the individual fills that I played during the performance. All right, let's get started. I'm going to demonstrate the groove that I played on the Chicken, and from there I'm going to start breaking it down so we can all start playing it. I have my metronome set at 108, and here we go. 1, 2, 3. Another way you can alter your snare drum employing ghost notes is to take the backbeat on 2 and 4 and make it a double stroke where the second beat is just dropping on the head. I'm going to continue to do this really slow at 80, and I'm going to employ just doing a double first on the backbeat. 1, 2, 3, 4. Playing a double on the 2 and 4 with your snare, you can't think of it as 2 beats the same velocity. You need to think the first beat is your accent and the second one is just a grace note. And to do that, it's more or less you just accent the backbeat and then you let the stick fall naturally using the force that's created when you hit the snare drum the first time. So here we go. if you notice how my hand's working, it looks like I'm just taking one stroke. And I'm allowing the stick that wants to bounce off the drum, I'm controlling that into just a drop of the stick. So then when you put it with a beat, 2, 3, 4. So now that you have a few different variations with your snare drum, you can start putting them together. I'm going to first play variation. Now let's move on to the next song, which is going to be Groove Cakes. This groove employs essentially the same basic framework as the groove from the Chicken, except it has a 16th note feel in the hi-hats. And in those 16th notes on the hi-hat, I'm accenting the 8th notes, and the inner 16th notes, the E's and the U's, are going to be played with the tip of my stick. I'm first going to demonstrate the groove, and then I'm going to break down this motion with the hi-hat. I have the metronome set at 85, which is about the performance tempo. 3, 4. So, essentially, the bass drum and the snare drum are the exact same as the Chicken. The only difference is this hi-hat playing 16th notes rather than 8th notes. So to get the accents on the hi-hat, I use the shoulder of my stick here. And I also hit the shoulder of the cymbal, the edge of the cymbal. And then to get the unaccented notes, I'm using the tip of my stick more where the writing might be for your hi-hat, so right here. And in order to get those two beats as one motion, instead of playing with my wrist everyone, I use the technique that I was using on the snare drum to get the double with my right hand. So if you watch my hand, it's going to go. So that second beat is like I'm pulling my hand up essentially and getting that second beat on there. So it's going to be. You could almost imagine that someone's pulling a string from your wrist. If you watch my wrist is going to move up, and that's going to change the angle of my stick to allow me to make this procedure happen. So I'm going to slow the groove down and play it at about 60 and just watch how that motion works. And then I'm going to start